Ukraine says Russia violating its own three-day ceasefire, calls it a farce. Ukraine's foreign minister said on Thursday Russia had repeatedly violated its own three-day ceasefire hours after it began and called the initiative a farce, while Moscow said Kyiv had continued fighting. There was, though, a drop off in combat activity after the ceasefire announced by Russian President Vladimir Putin came into force in the early hours of Thursday, with a respite in the drone and missile attacks that had rattled Ukrainian cities earlier this week. Predictably, Putin's parade ceasefire proves to be a farce. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said on X, referring to the truce which coincides with a May 9 parade on Moscow's Red Square to commemorate the end of World War II. Russian forces continue to attack across the entire front line. Sybiha wrote, from midnight to midday, Russia committed 734 ceasefire violations and 63 assault operations, 23 of which are still ongoing. He said Kyiv was notifying the United States and European states about Russia's actions. The Russian Defense Ministry, cited by Interfax news agencies, said that Ukraine in turn had carried out 488 attacks on Russian targets and twice tried to break through the border in the Kursk region. The two sides did not immediately comment on each other's battlefield reports, which Reuters could not independently confirm. A late night report issued by the General Staff of Ukraine's military nearly 24 hours in the proclaimed ceasefire said 154 clashes had been recorded. Russian forces, it said, had launched one missile attack and 15 airstrikes. The governor of southeastern Zaporizhia region said a Russian drone had struck a car in the south of the region, killing a passenger. In central Poltava region, the head of the regional military administration said air defense units had downed a missile deployed by Russian forces. The missile damaged private homes but caused no casualties. Ukraine derides a Kremlin ceasefire. Ukraine has not committed to abide by the ceasefire, calling it a ruse by Putin to create the impression he wants to end the war, which began when Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Putin says he is committed to achieving peace. Reuters journalist with a Ukraine drone unit near the front in eastern Ukraine said a small Russian infantry raiding party had tried to advance on Thursday but had been stopped by drones piloted by members of the unit. Ukrainian soldiers observed the clash on a live feed streamed onto monitors in their bunker. The infantry are still coming, said one of the soldiers in the unit. A 33-year-old who identified himself by his call sign Mika, a second person in the same unit who identified himself as Nazar, said in the 6 hours since the Russian ceasefire started, there had been 3 Russian strikes on his section of the front. Asked if the ceasefire was holding, he said the facts speak for themselves. A Ukrainian military spokesperson earlier said Russia had continued assaults in areas on the eastern front, and prosecutors said 2 people had been wounded along with the 55-year-old woman killed by bombs fired in the northern Sumy region. The Russian ceasefire falls on the 80th anniversary of the World War II defeat of Nazi Germany, for which Putin is hosting Chinese President Xi Jinping and other leaders ahead of a military parade on a Red Square on May 9th. Ukraine, like West, marks the anniversary on May 8th. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky marked the day by taking a rare walk in central Kyiv to pay his respects to fallen Ukrainian soldiers at a vast mound of Ukrainian flags planted on a grassy verge on the central square. There was no sign of his security detail in the selfie video he filmed as he passed pedestrians on the city's main drag, at one point pausing to say hi as cars tooted their horns and deriding Friday's planned pomp-filled ceremony in Moscow. There will be a parade of cynicism. You simply cannot call it anything else. A parade of bile and lies. As if not dozens of allied states, but Putin personally defeated Nazism, he said. Ukraine launched successive drone attacks on Moscow this week, which had forced the closure of airports in the Russian capital and the grounding of airliners. Russia's aviation authority Rosaviatsia said on Thursday evening that airline schedules heavily disrupted earlier in the week were now operating normally. Zelensky said on Thursday that he had told US President Donald Trump in a telephone call that a 30-day ceasefire was a real indicator of moving towards peace with Russia, and Kyiv was ready to implement it immediately. Zelensky said he had also spoken to Germany's new Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who assured him that his government could be relied upon for continued support. The Ukrainian president also spoke to European Union Executive Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you everyone. Bye.